So we're finally on the last mission of the In the Shadows of the Hill scenarios, and 130th Brigade is now going to try and exploit the break created by the Dorsets with an attack on the village of Maltot, or Objective Bath. This scenario covers the third phase of the wider operation, and we're already slightly behind the schedule, having expected to begin the capture at 0800, completing by 0900. The scenario also takes us onto a new part of the map and moves us off the Etterville Ridge into the valley beneath. We have 5 objectives in the area: the Western Orchard, Maltot Church, Maltot itself, the road east of Maltot, and a south of Maltot position which marks our limit of advance. I'll also be treating this as a cut-off point for the German reinforcements who are expecting to attempt to counterattack. The shape of the land has 3 other objectives at the bottom of the valley. On the northwest, this gives us potentially a good observation into the area, but the map itself includes the other side of the valley's U-shape, so there's a counter slope on the southern end of the map, and the south of Maltot also sits on this counter slope rising out of the valley. Large swathes of the map are open country, but the village itself and valley floor is a mixture of hedgerows, orchards, streets and buildings. Sticking with our now standard approach, the infantry will push down the northern valley slope with an artillery barrage suppressing targets ahead of them. Whilst I want some close tank support with the infantry, the western slope offers good observation onto the ground, so I'm keeping my anti-armour and some tanks on the western slope. As mentioned, I'm now quite used to German counterattacks, so the easternmost company will be making a best effort for a blocking position on Maltot South, bypassing the village. I'm not expecting the Germans in Maltot to go anywhere, and if there's one thing that's become clear, it's that attacking is hard. So, a meeting engagement or defensive action on the southern slope feels like it gives us more of a chance than tackling prepared positions that are being reinforced. The company itself will hook round and then follow the contours of the slope, presenting itself square onto any positions, so as to maximise supportive fire that can be brought to bear. On the west, I similarly want to gradually push tanks down into the valley to align on the road here. This again expects German forces to enter the map on the centre road at the southern end and then rush to reinforce Maltot. Then Maltot itself presents our last challenge. Fighting in villages or any built-up area has so far been very difficult for the Brits, with German positions bristling with MG42 or Spandaus. We're going to have to poke Maltot to identify positions and the best way into the village. As with all the missions, we have the 2 lead companies of a battalion, a supporting squadron of tanks, an engineer platoon, 2 troops of tank destroyers, and arriving as reinforcements, a company of the 5th Dorsets. And just as with the previous 3 missions, the first resistance we hit is an outpost line of riflemen. This is handled quite easily with platoon attacks, but we do take some losses. That doesn't really matter in this case, so in each case the platoon clears the position, goes through the reorg, collecting ammunition and casualties, and the reserve platoon of each company pushes forward to take up their positions. To our right on the open ridge, the tank destroyers are moved till they are just short of the brow, then creep gradually forwards into hull down positions. And a troop of tanks moves to support each of the companies. Back on the right, the tank destroyers hear the faint rumbling of armour, which is then confirmed as enemy tanks. This turns out to be a Tiger which is moving into the village of Maltot, and the tank destroyers begin engaging it. But their fire appears to draw the attention of anti-tank guns. And whilst we're focusing on the Tigers, the anti-tank gun gets its first hit on the Churchills. Now the first Tiger does dip out of sight into the valley, and we do get some fire onto the guns from our tank destroyers. But in terms of a bigger picture, basically what we have for the Hampshires and the A Squadron is the 2 companies pushing forward, 2 troops supporting one each company, and over on the right we have pushed one of the tank troops over to see if they can support getting far across the valley onto the tanks that are pushing into Maltot. Now we do take some losses to our armour, so we lost that Churchill to the anti-tank gun. I think as we're pulling back some of the tank destroyers that are ever so slightly too forward, they get hit too. Funnily enough, in both cases, well in most cases, they either seem to go clean through, destroy the vehicle, or cause the vehicle to panic, and in most cases the crew either bails or we get away with it somehow. Now this all coincides with the arrival of the 5th Dorsets, so they've arrived over on our right, and around the same time as the Tigers are dipping into the valley, we managed to get that troop of tanks up onto the line to support the tank destroyers that are currently on that ridgeline. Now at this point I'd managed to count 4 tanks heading into the village, so that means we're at least up against 1 platoon of Tigers. But it is a bit back and forth, so trying to find the sweet spot where they're just hulled down, we do have to pull the tanks back a bit. For the bigger picture, both of the companies reach a line just short of the village. And then on the left, you've got B Company. They're peeling left so that they can bypass the village up to the south of Maltot position. A Company's in the centre. They're currently holding their positions whilst we try and figure out what the Tigers are up to. And then on the right, we have the 5th Dorsets, who are making good progress over to the western orchard. As for the enemy, well, we know about the tanks that are heading into the village, and we also know about 2 anti-tank guns on the counter slope. So one we know for certain, that's in the centre, and then we're receiving fire on our right from an unidentified position. Then in terms of the village itself, we've made a few infantry contacts from machine guns and snipers. Now I'm not really sure what I expected them to do, but those tanks push right into the village and A Company has to go to ground whilst I figure out what to do. And so we end up with a Tiger phobia dilemma. The Tiger tank was a formidable vehicle boasting thick armour and a powerful 88mm gun. Its reputation for impenetrability spread among Allied troops, leading to widespread belief that it was nearly impossible to destroy. And from experience, that's no different in combat mission. Whilst our tank destroyers get some hits on them whilst they're racing towards the village, only one is destroyed. And I should add, this is after its crew panics, ditches it, and the tank destroyers hit it with a further salvo of hits. Where the tanks come to halt looks difficult to get eyes on, so I make the decision to take action and push tank hunting teams into the closer hedgerows and orchards, where the tanks are at a disadvantage with their limited visibility. This halt turns out to be temporary, however, and the Tigers push onward across the lines my troops were advancing on, again putting me in danger of being caught off balance. It's now B Company's turn to go to ground, and I set up a hasty line on this woodblock and field edge, the hope being that I can use the concealment in close quarters to ambush those 2 tanks heading my way or hit them on the flank. A Company is best positioned for this, so the men continue working to the final hedgerow at the edge of the village. The Tigers are buttoned up, and A Company has the benefit of concealment, so they do not receive any fire from the buildings. And with a bit of shuffling, the Piat gunner manages to get a lucky hit on the rear turret, knocking the first vehicle out. The second Tiger proved a bit more of a challenge. I couldn't get infantry close enough for another Piat shot, so risked rushing a Churchill forward, hoping to hit its weaker side or rear armour. Meanwhile, I moved a tank destroyer up on the other side to try and create a pincer movement. It took multiple hits before the crew finally decided to abandon it. The last Tiger proved to be the most stubborn yet. Initially I try and bring our trick shot Piat gun around whilst A Company reserve platoon drops smoke on it. This draws some fire, but with the smoke building I can rush another Churchill forward. The Piat gunner does manage to maintain his consistent accuracy and actually hits the Tiger a few times, but they don't have the same effect, and the Tiger gives us a few bursts of machine gun. This felt like a good distraction, so taking the opportunity, the Churchill breaks cover, spots the Tiger and gets the first shot off, which sails into the air again. For his efforts, the commander is machine gunned and the tank is smacked with an 88. The Tiger's thick frontal armour is now facing A Company, so I shift my attack to a different flank. The tank destroyers on the right, along with a troop of tanks, advance. The destroyers manoeuvring through the triangular orchard, while the tanks move on to the forward positions we'd looked at during planning. The furthest right anti-tank gun is either destroyed or abandoned, but we know another remains in the centre. But the tanks have to push up anyway, providing mutual fire support and suppressing fire on the remaining gun. Despite this, the gun manages to hit the lead tank while the supporting tank is reloading its belt. As the tank destroyers reach the edge of the woods, they spot the Tiger and open fire, shifting positions between shots. The massive tank destroys one of them though. Meanwhile, another tank destroyer has raced over to the centre. The Tiger's attention is still on the orchard, and whilst it manages to punch a hole in the second tank destroyer, the tank destroyer in the centre gets 2 more hits onto the beast, finally forcing the crew to abandon their vehicle. This account probably doesn't fully convey the anxiety these vehicles caused me, or the complete standstill my advance faced while trying to eliminate them. The notes show a good 30 to 40 turns focused solely on destroying these tanks. In the post-game review as well, I saw just how many hits each one absorbed. Every time I'd thought I'd disabled a gun, jammed a turret, or even ripped off a track, the lumbering monster would simply trundle off, turn to face, then fire its massive gun, sending troops and vehicles scrambling for cover. With the armour threat neutralised, our general advance continues, so the Dorsets press up to the edge of the orchard, tanks down into the valley and their cut-off point, and A Company onto Maltot itself. B Company is also pushing up, so they're heading towards the south of Maltot position, and ahead of them we're putting down a fire mission to soften up any positions on the ridge ahead of their advance. Whilst the lead platoon is pushing off though, it receives small arms fire on its left, so it looks like the Germans have a set of mortar pits dug into the courtyard of the chateau. The reserve platoon is swung round to assault and clear the manor buildings, and this is quite successful, so the mortar unit is not a frontline infantry unit. They can't really use their mortars, and they are primarily equipped with bolt-action rifles, so the platoon gets a break from Spandau fire and comfortably clears the area. So B Company ends up in a slightly wider triangle, oriented to the south-southeast. It's the same 2 platoons up shape, with one on the chateau and the other partway up the hill towards the South Maltot position. Then the reserve platoon is covering the east of Maltot Road. A Company is slightly more of a muddle though. It's almost in a 2 up, 1 in reserve shape, but it's a much more tight area. They've also had to try a few things to break into the area of Maltot. They still have tank support with them, who are currently brassing up all the windows at the west of the village, but when they tried working in from the orchard on our left, they bumped quite a few positions on the east of Maltot Road. So I try swinging them around to our right across the field that last stubborn Tiger was on. In the centre just off the left side of the road into town, engineers blast walls through to a U-shaped building, and we end up in some very scrappy fighting. The German positions in this building repel the first assault with an overwhelming response of Spandaus, and the supporting tank is unable to bring its guns to bear. The infantry pulls back and the tanks on the left-hand side of the street switch to cannon fire, shelling the buildings to give the defenders a good knockabout. This has the desired effect, and engineers take the U-shaped building, but in-depth positions come to life further into the village, and again we need a mix of tank, machine gun and cannon to allow infantry to advance. To the south, B Company completed clearing the chateau. However, just as their left platoon begins to reorganise for defence, we get the first sightings of a German counterattack developing from the nearby woods. They're generally set for this, but a small fire team that's been clearing the back manor building is exposed when the attack does come in. Back at the higher battalion level, we have A Company clearing the last dogged holdouts at the back of Maltot. The left platoon of B Company is facing the German counterattack on the chateau, and whilst the right platoon of B Company has reached the hedgerow at the top of the Maltot south position, we now have German tanks supporting the counterattack coming down on them. This time it's Panzer IVs. This is a slightly more even fight, with our Churchills now having significantly thicker armour and a comparable gun, but the Panzers do have greater mobility. One brave Bren gunner manages to kill the lead tank commander and scare the trailing tank enough to get him to button up, but the platoon is initially on its own, and I don't like how exposed I've left them to pull them back from the ridge under fire. This is again a bit sloppy, and the platoon actually ends up wedged in the middle of a tank battle which they can't meaningfully contribute to. It does, however, demonstrate the importance of balance and planning though, so I don't think we needed to take those losses on the south of Maltot position, and that platoon with its single Piat and small arms could have avoided the losses with better force placement. The lead fire team in the manor, which has been desperately fighting since the German counterattack came in, is also in a similar position, so the reorganisation wasn't quite complete and they can't make it back to their section, so they're wrapped up as the Germans take that building. B Company's reserve platoon, which had been covering the east of Maltot Road, is now committed to support the manor fight, and artillery is called in on the woods. This isn't an objective for us, but killing Germans in the counterattack is easier than on the offensive. As we've seen through the Normandy fighting, defenders always tend to have the advantage. This doesn't mean we have to stand and fight to the death though, and with the lead fire team gone and pressure mounting, the left platoon begins withdrawing to friendly lines that the reserve platoon is now beginning to occupy. At the battalion level, A Company is reorganising and recovering casualties while tanks continue to shell the last two buildings in Maltot. B Company is focused on stabilising its lines. I think I had considered repelling the attack with my own counterattack, but something triggers a victory condition and the SS surrender. So we've taken 50 killed and 61 wounded for 128 killed and 48 wounded. The Germans have knocked out 5 of our tanks for 7 of their own, and as it's a surrender we get full points for the location objectives. The review of the battlefield again shows the type of enemy we're up against though, so SS men in Maltot stand amongst the bloody lifeless mess of their former squad mates, and the Tigers sit dormant, dimpled with numerous shell and Piat hits. This is again an excellently mapped scenario and covers the events of that morning really well. In real life, although some of the battalion managed to enter Maltot, they were met with a strong counterattack. With reinforcements from the 5th Dorsets and tank support from A Squadron, the Hampshires managed to break into the enemy's defences, and similar to our game, as per their pre-deployment SOP, had pushed B Company past Maltot to cut off reinforcements. The success was, however, short-lived. Simultaneous to the Hampshire's arrival, 4 German Tiger tanks had rushed to bolster German defences in the village, and a fierce crossfire erupted from Hill 112 and Maltot. The Dorsets west of the village were driven back, and by midday the situation was now in the balance. Under intense strain, the 9th Royal Tank Regiment was close to breaking, and A Squadron was at 75% losses. Then at 3 PM the 4th Dorsets were rushed to support the Hampshires, who were now under pressure from another developing counterattack. Having sustained very high losses, the battalion was forced to withdraw, and so as the 4th Dorsets approached the village, they met the Hampshires withdrawing. The Dorsets then found themselves immediately plunged into a vicious street battle for Maltot, and then at 8:30 the 4th Dorsets were themselves given permission to withdraw. Only a minority of the Dorsets actually received this message, and when they reassembled in Horseshoe Wood, only 5 officers and 80 men remained of the battalion. The attack on Maltot had accounted for the whole of A Company, of which not one member had returned, and for 2/3 of the other 3 companies. It was subsequently learned that a large number of the missing were taken prisoner during the night. Fighting continued in the Hill 112 area through the night, including fighting for Etterville. Beyond the 4th Dorset's initial losses taking Etterville, the defence decimated the 9th Cameronians with 13 killed, 39 missing and 149 wounded. For the Cameronians, this was the 3rd time they'd taken such brutal losses in under a month, and so it's no wonder the British were concerned with the rapidly shrinking number of available infantry replacements. That then neatly brings us up to the next mission away from Operation Jupiter and on to Operation Goodwood, Britain's largest ever tank battle.